Good afternoon, boys and girls. Mrs. Hawkins here to read you a fairy tale. And I'm going to be reading you the classic Cinderella. I'm going to be reading it out of this big, huge book. Can you read what it says? Classic Fairy Tales. And this book is so thick. Look at it. I used to read all these fairy tales to my three adult girls. They're all in their 20s and they love to listen to a fairy tale. Every night we would crawl into bed and I would read them a fairy tale. So I'm going to read you a Cinderella. Remember, classic fairy tales, you always start with Once Upon a Time. And another thing they do is end with Happily Ever After. It usually has a sad story, but then it always turns out great. So let's begin. Let me put my glasses on. Cinderella. Once upon a time, can you see the illustrations? I'll scoot up closer. There you go. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful, sweet young girl who was very unhappy. You see her right there? There's the character they're talking about. Her mother had died and her father had married another woman. Unfortunately, her stepmother and her two stepsisters did not like her one bit. While her stepsisters had all the comforts of life, the poor girl was treated like a servant. She had to work hard all day, and only when evening came was she allowed to sit for a while by the fire and eat the cinders. And there she is. Remember what cinders are? They're little pieces of fire. Does that give you a clue about maybe why she's called Cinderella? Well, that is how she got her name. You're right. Her nickname was Cinderella. Cinderella used to spend long hours all alone talking to the cat. The cat would say, meow, which really meant, cheer up. You have a beauty. You have something neither of your stepsisters have, beauty. It was quite true. Cinderella even dressed in rags. Do you see her rags? Rags mean clothes that are all torn up. And look at her beautiful stepsisters. They get very pretty dresses, and that's not fair, is it? It is not. Cinderella, even dressed in rags and with a dusty gray face from the cinders, was a lovely girl, while her stepsisters, no matter how splendid and elegant their clothes were, clumsy and ugly. One day beautiful new dresses were delivered to the house. A ball was to be held at court, and the stepsisters were getting ready to go to it. Cinderella didn't dare ask. You know what a ball is? Big giant dance. They all get all fancied up and go. What about me? For she knew very well what the answer would be. You're staying at home to wash the dishes and scrub the floors. Oh dear, I'm so unhappy. Cinderella sighed to the cat. Suddenly something amazing happened. There was a burst of light and a fairy appeared. Can you see the illustrations? Don't be alarmed, Cinderella, said the fairy. The wind blew me your size, and I know you would love to go to the ball, and you shall. How can I, dressed in rags? Cinderella replied. The fairy smiled, and with a flick of her magic wand, Cinderella found herself wearing a beautiful ball gown. Now, said the fairy, we'll need to get you a coach. A real lady would never go to a ball on foot. Quick, get me a pumpkin, she ordered. Oh, of course, said Cinderella, rushing away. Then the fairy turned to the cat. You bring me 7 mice. Cinderella soon returned with a fine pumpkin, and the cat with 7 mice. Good, exclaimed the fairy, and with a flick of her magic wand, the pumpkin turned into a sparkling coach, and the mice became 6 white horses, while the seventh mouse turned into a coachman. Cinderella could hardly believe her eyes. You are now ready to go to the ball. The prince will be enchanted by your loveliness. But remember, you must leave at midnight. That is when the spell ends. Remember what midnight is? 12 o'clock. That's right. Your coach will turn back into a pumpkin, and the horses and coachmen will become mice again, and you will be dressed once again in rags and wearing clogs instead of these dainty slippers. Do you understand? Cinderella smiled and said yes. I understand. When Cinderella entered the ballroom, the palace, a hush fell. Everyone stopped to admire her elegance, beauty, and grace. Who can that be? People asked each other. Even the two stepsisters would never have guessed that the beautiful girl was really poor Cinderella. When the prince set eyes on Cinderella, he walked over to her, bowed deeply, and asked her to dance. In fact, he danced with Cinderella all evening. Who are you, fair maiden? The prince kept asking her. But Cinderella only replied, What does it matter who I am? You will never see me again anyway. Oh, but I shall. I'm quite certain, he replied. Cinderella was having a wonderful time at the ball when all of a sudden she heard the first stroke of midnight. Remembering what the fairy had said, Cinderella quickly said goodbye to the prince. And as she ran down the stairs, she lost one of her slippers. See it right there? But she had no time to stop and pick it up. If the last stroke of midnight were to sound, what a disaster that would be. She fled from the palace and vanished into the night. The prince, who was now madly in love with her, picked up her slipper and said to the ministers, Go and search everywhere for the girl whose foot fits this slipper. I will not be content until I find her. So the ministers tried the slipper on the foot of all the girls in the kingdom, but it didn't fit any of them. Finally, they came to Cinderella's house. The two stepsisters struggled in vain to fit their big feet into the little slipper. Then one of the ministers, can you see this page? Then one of the ministers noticed Cinderella and asked her to try it on. The slipper fit perfectly. At that very moment, the fairy appeared and raised her magic wand, and in a flash, Cinderella's rags were transformed into a splendid dress. Her stepmother and stepsisters gaped at her in amazement, and the minister said, Come with us, fair maiden. The prince awaits to present you with an engagement ring. So Cinderella joyfully went with them to the palace, and they lived happily ever. All right, boys and girls, keep reading and read those fairy tales. Bye.